Welcome to the Kingsburg Community Church podcast, Thinking About Faith. We pray that this podcast helps you deepen your faith in God and stir some inner thoughts about the Christian life.
Hi, everyone. It's Pastor Ed here. Welcome to another episode of the KCC podcast, Thinking About Faith. It's good to be with you today. And today I'm addressing a topic that's probably a little depressing. I've entitled this, What is a Good Death? You know, the ancient Greeks had an idea that there was such a thing as a good death. And that's where we get the word euthanasia, a good death. Is there such thing as a good death? My oldest best friend is dying. He called me a couple of weeks ago, and they've discovered he has stage 4 colon cancer. It's spread throughout him, and his doctor tells him to expect that he has a year or two to live. The good thing is that Phil and I, through the years, have shared many, many deep experiences of Jesus' love. He's a Christian, spent many, many years, decades working for his church as their IT advisor. So talking to him, just how you feeling about this, what have you? And he said, you know, I just feel like God has a purpose for me, and I have a sense of peace, and my faith is strong. And so he was cheering me up on the conversation, not the other way around. I'm looking forward to, in a couple of weeks, spending a whole day with him. He lives up in Sacramento, where I grew up. I don't get up there very often anymore. And so we're just going to spend the day together, visit some of the old haunts that we used to hang out at when we were in junior high and high school, share memories, and just be together. It's great that he's trusting in God. He did, and we actually agreed as we were talking, that it's not a matter of dying that bothers us. We're both strong believers and believe that the world to come is actually better than this world. But we're both nervous about those last weeks of pain and discomfort. If you ever walked along next to someone who's dying, it's often filled with kind of suffering, physical suffering, of course, the sadness of loss and the grief that has already begun even before the person has died. The truth is that baby boomers like me are getting old. And so because of that, we're all starting to think about the fact that we're approaching the last years of our life here on earth. We all are aware that for the last 10 years, California has allowed for what is called physician-assisted death or physician-assisted suicide for people who are diagnosed with a condition that is deemed to be fatal within 6 months of death. Happy to say that only about 1,000 people have made use of this law in California over the last 10 years. But more and more Christian believers will be considering whether it's permissible within the confines of the Christian faith to make use of physician-assisted suicide. And I wanted to spend some time this morning just talking about what guidance does the Bible give when we're facing end-of-life decisions, and how should Christians think biblically about physician-assisted suicide. Now, of course, this is a deeply personal and emotional topic. My purpose here is to explore what the Bible says and why Christians have historically been against physician-assisted suicide. But at the same time, end-of-life decisions should be met by Christians with a sense of compassion, not condemnation. There's real pain here. Every situation entails suffering, whether that's just the pain of dying of a terminal illness, or the loss of dignity that often accompanies someone having to care for you. You're not able to care for yourself anymore. The depression, the fear. First, let's start with a definition. Physician-assisted suicide is not the same thing as euthanasia. Euthanasia is when it's what we do with our pets. When pet is in pain, it's at the end of their life. We end their suffering by an injection. So they would not have died had there not been an injection, and that's done by usually a veterinarian. That's not, again, physician-assisted suicide means that the physician provides the means of death, that is the drugs usually, or the injection that will cause the death. But the patient himself or herself actually administers it. And I don't know exactly, but I've heard that there are machines where all the patient has to do is push the button when the time is right, and it does the injection, and that the person passes away in short order. So physician-assisted suicide is not the same thing as euthanasia, where it's actively the physician doing the injection. Physician-assisted suicide is not the same thing also as refusing medical treatment at the end of life. I know many people who choose to have do not resuscitate orders. So if they were to go into cardiac or respiratory arrest, don't try to revive me. Those who say, even if I were to stop breathing, or if something that's life-threatening were to happen, don't intervene with an extraordinary, don't try to, shock my heart to get it going again. Don't do artificial respiration in order to help me breathe. Just let me go. That's a different sort of thing. And Christians have long felt that allowing a person to die naturally when it's their time is perfectly acceptable within the understanding of the biblical text that we'll be looking at in a minute. It's also, physician-assisted suicide is distinct from palliative care and hospice. The whole idea of palliative care and hospice is to make a person more comfortable in their last days, so they don't have the level of pain and discomfort that otherwise would have accompanied the approach of death. And again, there are many biblical reasons why this is a biblically sound thing to do, to have hospice or palliative care in those last days and weeks of a person's life. There are other reasons, however, why people feel that physician-assisted suicide might be preferable, and I can understand why people would want to do that. First, it's kind of what I was saying. Phil and I were talking, and none of us were not excited about those last couple of weeks because we're nervous about the pain and the suffering of it, and we know that compassion means that we don't like to see people suffering. We want to end suffering, and we feel that ending suffering is a loving response. It certainly is when we put down our pets. We talked about that. We also live in an age of autonomy where every human being feels that, in our society, feels that a essential component of what it means to be a human being is to have autonomous choices over our lives and our bodies. So if I choose to drink Coke instead of Pepsi, I have the autonomy to do that. If I choose to go on a walk, I have the autonomy to do that. And of course, one of the things that we all kind of fear as we age is losing autonomy. We're not able to do those things that we used to do, or someone else has to make those decisions for us if we have some sort of memory affective disorder like Alzheimer's or another form of senility. We all are nervous about the indignity of dying. How many times have we heard people say, I don't want to be a burden on anybody else. I don't want to be a burden on caretakers. Certainly don't want to be a burden on my family, the people I love the most. Of course, another thing that goes along with autonomy in our age is our desire to be in control of our lives and even to the end of our lives. I want to be able to die on my own terms. And that's one of the real strong arguments for physician-assisted suicide, that people say, I'm able to say my goodbyes while I'm still able to, and then I'm able to pass on peacefully on my own terms. So those are the arguments in favor. We can certainly understand why people might find those arguments attractive. But at the same time, we recognize as Christians that this isn't just a legal issue. It's legal in the state of California, but it's also a moral and a spiritual issue. And in order to evaluate it biblically, we have to start with the biblical understanding of what human life is. Human life is sacred, and it's God-given. We are created in the image of God. We all know the text from Genesis chapter 1. So God created man in his own image, male and female. He created them, that were created in the image of God. And so because of that, there is something inherently sacred about human life that isn't true, say, about our pets or cows or fish or insects. They're not created in the image of God. There is something specifically unique about human creation. It's in the image of God. And because of that, we reverence, with a special reverence, the life that God has given us, because it is in the image of God himself. We recognize that God is the giver and the taker of life. In Psalm 139, one of my favorite Psalms, the psalmist says, "You knit me together in my mother's womb. Your eyes beheld my unformed body before I ever came to be." There's something special and unique about God's creative activity in creating a human life in the womb. It is a miracle of creation. Of course, one of the 10 commandments, the sixth commandment, very, very important. There's a commandment against killing. You shall not kill, or you shall not murder. And of course, to take our own life it's the same as taking someone else's life. It's against the commandment, even if it's legal. Christians believe that God is sovereign over every step we make, every breath we take, and that God has accounted for the days of our lives before one of them came to be. That's also in Psalm 139. Our lives belong to the Lord, and especially as Christians. Romans 14 says, whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. In 1 Corinthians 6, 19 and 20, Paul says, you are not your own, for you were bought with a price. We belong to God. And so because of that, it's God's prerogative. It's his judgment on whether we live or we die. And to shortcut that is to say that we want to take God's decision about his image in our bodies away from him. So we shouldn't do that lightly. At the same time, We recognize that suffering is real and tragic. There's an entire book about suffering, the book of Job. It never minimizes Job's pain. There's an entire book, the Book of Lamentations, that is filled with poetry that is written out of human sorrow and suffering. Jesus himself suffered physically and emotionally as he was led to the cross. However, we as Christians believe that suffering is redemptive. Just as Jesus needed to suffer and to die on the cross in order to purchase the lives and the salvation of all who believe, we believe that there is some deeper understanding of human suffering that can bring good out of suffering. James 1 says, "Consider it all joy when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, that you may be made complete and lacking in nothing." So there's this idea that God uses our suffering to make us stronger, to evoke compassion of others, to acknowledge his sovereignty. And we remember the passage in 2 Corinthians where Paul talks about that thorn in his flesh. We don't know what that was, but we believe it was some sort of physical affliction that repeatedly kept him from doing the things he wanted to do that was very painful. And he said he asked God to remove that thorn in his flesh, but that God responded to him by saying, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in your weakness." So he's basically said, "No, Paul, I'm not going to take this. I'm not going to heal you. I'm not going to take this thorn in your flesh away, because through your having to cope with this painful condition, people can see my power displayed in you. You're not made perfect." This is one of the problems that we have with those who would preach a gospel that says that if you only have faith, you'll be healed of any human disease, any infirmity, all pain will be taken away. Well, if that was true, then why didn't Paul get healed? Why didn't Jesus heal every broken and painful person in his day? He only healed some of them. Jesus healed and comforted, but often he just stayed with those who were suffering. He didn't eliminate suffering by eliminating the sufferers. Let me say that again. Jesus didn't eliminate suffering by eliminating the sufferers. Sometimes he healed the suffering. Sometimes he consoled those who suffered. There's some ethical concerns with physician-assisted suicide. It redefines compassion to meaning ending life instead of caring for life. And that seems to be antithetical to our idea of what compassion is. Biblical compassion means being present, caring, loving person. Never in the Bible is biblical compassion killing someone. We also have to acknowledge that human beings being human beings, that physician-assisted suicide and other sorts of, by the way, there's also a slippery slope argument. You probably are aware that in Europe, it's possible for people who are just depressed and who consistently over, I think, a period of 6 months express a desire to end their lives. They're perfectly healthy, but they're given the means to end their own lives. And that's legal within the medical profession of those European countries. We can see there that in those situations, it very much weakens the protection for the vulnerable. Instead of treating someone's depression and their mental issues, instead of coming next to them and offering them compassion, it allows them an easy way to get rid of the problem, and then the person is seen as the problem. And this is particularly a problem as the baby boom ages and our society becomes very much populated with elderly, disabled, depressed, and even poor people. And we know of situations where there was even subtle pressure from family members when someone said, I don't want to be a burden. And the family members are seeing all the financial resources of the person being expended on medical care. Well, this is a way to stop spending that money on medical care. And, it gets abused. People start encouraging someone to take the assisted suicide way out. Medicine is supposed to be for healing and comfort, not to intentionally end life. This conflicts with the biblical call to preserve life because human life is in the image of God. We have, fortunately, good biblical alternatives to physician-assisted suicide. Palliative care and hospice have gotten so good that rarely do you see someone anymore dying in misery. It's not necessarily pleasant, but it's not excruciatingly painful like it used to be. There are particularly some cancers that are very resistant to pain meds. And in those situations, people spend a lot of time sleeping. They'll give them some sort of morphine or something like that, and they just spend a lot of time sleeping. And because of that, the pain is managed because they are unconscious and allows them dignity and comfort in those last hours. It also allows for the ministry of presence. And this is one of the things that I think in the next 20 to 30 years as the baby boom ages and dies, we're going to see the church as a community of care, that the church is going to be as much present by the bedside as it is in the sanctuary on Sunday morning. The Christian community is going to mean walking with people through the process of leaving this world, dying, and being welcomed into the arms of Jesus. The good news, of course, is the news of the gospel. Death does not have the final word. Our Christian hope is in resurrection and new creation. So ultimately, we look to the Bible for hope, and we look beyond earthly expectations. The earthly expectation may be that God wants me to have dignity, but we see that dignity comes from being God's image bearer, not being autonomous and being able to control our own lives. To surrender to Him as an image bearer, that is the greatest dignity, to be His servant, not to be in control of our own lives. To the objection that suicide is the most loving option, love seeks to comfort, not to eliminate the sufferer. And finally, the Bible gives us moral principles to evaluate the end of life. And we believe in the sanctity of life, compassion, and trust in God. These are not easy decisions. And as a pastor, I've walked through very difficult dying episodes with family members, but I've also seen beautiful last moments, truly beautiful last moments. I believe that when Jesus said, I came that they might have life and have it abundantly, that's the promise that abundant life will stretch on through eternity. And of course, one of my favorite texts from Romans 8, Paul says that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing to the glory that is to come. So it may be that we suffer momentarily at the end of this life, but we walk into the presence of the God whose image we bear. Okay, I hope that's been helpful for you. If you haven't faced this question yet, you probably will. And let's make sure that the biblical word takes precedent. All right, have a great week, and I'll talk to you in a week. Bye-bye.